because the French back to France. And he said, I'm going to lay out Washington, D.C. I'm going to design it just like my African ancestors. Got a brother to lay out the city because he knew about his own African ancestral story because his genetic library was open. But yet, for many years, brothers and sisters, in my 13 years of travel in Kemet, for many years I saw Ursa Ma'at Ra, Septepen Ra, now called Ramses II, in a field. And they reconstructed it and put it on display around the United States, or snakes. This today that they reconstructed after laying out in the field for many years. Now they have reconstructed it, but it went around the United States and they brought us down. The Third Eye brought many brothers and sisters down to lecture on Ramses II. The Third Eye. This is what Washington Post said, this Arab said, who his people came from the invasion, right? Yes, Egypt says Ramses II wasn't black. The ancient Egyptian pharaoh Ramses II was neither black nor white, but says Egypt's cultural embassy to the United States, who is wondering how his country even got involved in the American dispute over the question. I wish people would not involve us in this kind of mess, which we have nothing to do with, said Abdul Aliyah, the director of the Egyptian Embassy Cultural Office. No, they invaded in 640 AD. You got a whole lot to do with it. The invasion of the Arabs. They should not use us and involve us in this racial problem that I thought was solved and buried a long time ago, the Egyptian official said. We are not in any way related to the original black Africans of the Deep South. Ramses II, who ruled ancient Egypt for 68 years in the 12th century BC, was neither black nor white, but Egyptian, he said. Egypt, of course, is a country in Africa, but this doesn't mean it belongs to Africa at large. This is an Egyptian heritage, not an African heritage. Mubarak fired him soon after making that statement. But let's go back to New York City and the Natural History Museum and see what they say. Interaction between the North and the South. Ancient Egypt was very much an African country, despite its numerous contacts with the Near East. Out of the South came not only much of Egypt's wealth, but also much of the political strength and forms of mercenary soldiers. Ideas to cosmology that we dealt with, mythology that we already dealt with, and medicine that we already dealt with, also came from the southern part of the continent, particularly the use of animals as symbols of deities and ancestral spirits, connecting the world of the living with the world of the dead, and turned Egypt as the most advanced culture in ancient Africa, disseminated various traits of its civilization far into the continent, up the Nile and across the desert. Evidence of this two-way traffic can still be seen in the material culture of contemporary Africa. The animal symbolisms is more than reminiscent of dynastic Egypt. Headrests from all parts of Africa bear a strong resemblance to those from early Egypt. All indicate an ancient and vital interchange of ideas as well as objects throughout the whole continent. Dr. Yusuf Inyakinen, the first book I came in contact with, back in the early 1970s, Black Man of the Nile, he showed the whole 4,200 miles cultural connection of African people as well as other parts of the African continent. Harka of the 25th dynasty also saved his own Hebrew brothers from annihilation of the Assyrians, by the way. But the 25th dynasty gave us Kashada, Pianki, and Shabaka, and Taharka. These were the brothers here who came up from the south. Why? Because Egypt was being invaded by the sand dwellers, the troglodytes, and he was saving his own land. That's why he did not destroy like the invaders that came in. They destroyed because the culture did not belong to them. But the kingdom of Tasseti goes back over 26,000 years, and this Nubian monarchy called the oldest. Evidence of the oldest recognizable monarchy in human history preceding the rise of the earliest Egyptian kings by several generations has been discovered in artifacts of ancient Nubia in Africa. The discovery is expected to stimulate a new appraisal of the origins of civilization in Africa, raising the question to what extent later Egyptian culture may have derived its advanced political structure from the ancient Nubians, meaning that Nubia was the mother of Egypt. Going back over 26,000 years, a man by the name of Bruce Williams from the Oriole Institute in Chicago went to do some research there before they flooded out this area, killing thousands of our Nubian brothers there with the Aswan Dam. Flooded them out. Over 50,000 brothers and sisters there. They flooded them out by building the Aswan Dam. And he found there a kingdom called Tasseti in an area called Quistul, going back over 26,000 years. That means long before the European Cro-Magnon man, we had an ancient kingdom going back over 26,000 years. How about Monumentapa with the Shona people who built cone pyramids? These were grand master builders in this area of Zimbabwe. That's why Iron Smith, here, this barbarian, when he was there, he did not let the people know about this culture because he knew that would be the liberation of their mind. And in fact, let's go and see the brothers and the priests in the interior of Africa, the priests with the leopard skin, called the Sim priests in Kemet, identical to our brothers in Kemet. Not only that, we can see the reddish-brown complexion of the Maasai brothers are identical to the brothers from ancient Nubia. Not only that, we see, Hitler and the boys came and took your African ancestral symbol called the Gramadan, showing representing the 4 elements and the 4 qualities called the swastika today. They came into African temples of Nubia and took these right off of our African ancestral temples. Nubia's ancient name was called Ta-Nehisi, taking it from the African Ta-Nehisi and showing this as an African ancestral symbol, have nothing to do with Hitler and his madness, nor no swastika as they call it. In fact, we can go on to see these are the brothers right here from ancient Nubia, who in fact not only circumnavigated Africa long before Vasco da Gama, but also came across the Atlantic Ocean. Long before the good ship Jesus, the Grace of God and the Holy Mary, long before the slave ships, your African ancestors came across the Atlantic Ocean. Here we see from the ancient kingdom of Nubia and Mali, where we came to La Venta and San Lorenzo and the Yucatan Peninsula and built the Olmec civilization. Huge Olmec heads, over 100 tons each, still there. Where our ancestors came across the Atlantic Ocean, following underwater streams in the oceans, we came across the Atlantic Ocean long before old Chris and the boys. In fact, a man by the name of Heyerdahl wanted to prove that Africans came across the Atlantic Ocean. And he took and built this papyrus boat identical to our African ancestors called the Ra Expedition. He came across in 40 days. Showing Africans already came across the Atlantic Ocean. And when they dug up this huge African Olmec head, when they first dug it up, they covered it back up. Until Matthew Stirlings in 1926 dug it back out. And they were making up all kinds of stories, but they did not consider you one time. Showing that these were the huge African heads that African people built there. And Science Digest magazine, Michael Koo, one of their top anthropologists, made this statement. Traditional anthropologists argue that any resemblance is purely accidental. Michael Koo agrees that the heads represent an ancient dynasty. He contends, however, that the broad noses and the full lips grew out of an artistic technique limited by the lack of metal tools. That could carve deeply and by desire to avoid protruding or thin facial features that might break off. They said they didn't have the proper tools. That's why they made these features right here. Some even said the stones fell over. That's why they made their features like that. No, they made their features like this because that's exactly how they look. Simple as that. That's exactly how they look, brothers and sisters, That's exactly how they look. Psychopathic racism at its best. So now, we see Newsweek came out September 23rd, 1991, question that Nubians from East Africa sail on Phoenician fleets to the Western Hemisphere before 1492. Had to be somebody else's fleets. It couldn't be their own fleets. Had to be Phoenician fleets, Keep in mind, white folks didn't even know the world was round in 1492, But answer, sculpture dated 800 BC found in Mexico has African features. It's good, but it's not conclusive evidence. Well, let's go look for the conclusive evidence, brothers and sisters. This is a Mayan tomb. Notice the Sim priest with the leopard skin that we saw. Notice the Uraeus or the cobra on top of their head. Where did they get it from? Let's go back to Africa, across the Atlantic Ocean. They got it right up out of Africa, Showing King Tutankhamun's tomb, showing the Sim priest of the opening of the mouth ceremony with the cobra on top of his head in the leopard skin. Let's go look at some more conclusive evidence. How about the step pyramid there? And now what they call the Americas in the Western world, Where did it come from? Let's go back to the 3rd dynasty of Imhotep, the step pyramid almost 5,000 years ago. That's where it came from. So now, brothers and sisters, let's look, because Dr. Van Sertima, who's been researching this for many years, but in one of his books he points out, in the sleeve of his book he said, Christopher Columbus is at a dinner intriguing with Don Juan, the king of Portugal, who first tells him of a secret trade route that the Africans have been traveling to the New World. The news is easily confirmed by Columbus because on his second voyage to the Americas, the natives describe repeatedly to him the black men who traded with them, whose spears were tipped with gold. Well, let's go to the Mayan art and we see Africans coming with their spears tipped with gold. This is Mayan art right here, brothers and sisters, showing where Africans came across with their spears tipped with gold, just as they said. So, before they would consider you one time, brothers and sisters, they would make up all kinds of stories. But let's look at the map of Columbus, showing that Columbus takes the same route of our African ancestors, as you see right here, coming down along the African coast, and showing here the Canary Islands. This is where he takes off, following the underwater current that our ancestors follow and coming to what they call the Americas today. In fact, we go on to see now where it says, new myth for old. Once viewed as manifest destiny in tights, Columbus is now seen as Hitler and a carnival landing like a virus in the innocent new world. Yes, he came like a virus, and yes, he was a Hitler to the Native Americans, the indigenous people of this land. He was our Hitler as well. And yes, they brought the viruses, like syphilis is a disease that they brought to the Western world. Yes, brothers and sisters, Dr. John Henry Clark, our Grand Master teacher, told us Christopher Columbus and the African Holocaust, slavery and the rise of the European capitalism. That's the only thing Columbus brought to the New World. They set up the slave trade, set it in motion. That's all he brought to the New World, exterminating the indigenous people of this land. So let's deal with the Hitlers of our day and of yesterday. This is a good book to get on Henry Clark. In fact, in this book, called The Chosen People from the Caucasus, Michael Bradley points out, the point of all this is that we now come to an issue not presented in any popular history of the Jewish people or any of the numerous books on anti-Semitism. Not a whisper or reference to it has entered our public school system. And it is simply that Jews were major participants in the genocide of American Indians as conquistadors, and were major participants in the greatest human tragedy history knows. No, not Hitler's Holocaust, the transatlantic slave trade, brothers and sisters. Taking our African ancestors from the African continent, this was a trade in Africans as slaves, called the good ship Jesus, the grace of God, and the Holy Mary. That was the name of the slave ships. They set this whole thing in motion right now, bringing it up to our spiritual Holocaust today. Right here, why can't we talk about our story, huh? Naming the good ship Jesus and the grace of God and the Holy Mary. But brothers and sisters, long before we came across on some slave ships, your African ancestors came across on their own ships. Huh? Long before Chris and the boys were out of those caves, your ancestors came across the Atlantic Ocean. That's why you got to go back to your ownalism. Because if you don't go back to your ownalism, as my brother was talking about, and build your own economic power, you'll find yourself in the bottom of some other people's ships. So you better get back to building your ships. Huh? Like we once did before. And that's why, brothers and sisters, they make up all kinds of stories. And they said it was the chariots of the gods. Some spacemen came here and did this. Before they would consider you, one time they would say some spacemen came from the star system Galactica, from a black hole. And I said the brothers came and they had sense enough to give the knowledge to us. Now they're even saying that there's pyramids and Hormacus on Mars. And a brother got a 500-page book. He said, brother, crazy, but there's a pyramid of Macus on Mars. I said, brother, you got a spaceship. Why you tied up in something on Mars and you can't get there? Got you looking up in the sky. Why don't you get on a 747 and fly back to Africa and see the Hormacus and the pyramids right there in Africa? Talking about pyramids under the ocean and never taking scuba diving. Now they got us looking out. Had nothing to do with no spacemen. They were the little twa that we carved in Kemet, showing that he's called Best here once he got to Egypt, showing that they were the seed people who came up out of the interior of Africa, brothers and sisters. They left us their symbolism of communication for countless thousands of years. Once we were able to open up our genetic memory bank, we can go back and see the symbolism that they left us. Always had their tongue sticking out. Let's go to Asia. Can we find him in Asia? Yes, here he is, right here with his tongue sticking out. This is the symbolism that they left. This was the language that these early Africans of the Great Lakes regions, who were the first who migrated up out of Africa. They were the people who always showed them with their tongue sticking out because, why? Happy. They came from the beginning of the Nile. The Nile was called Happy. Right on the mountains of the moon. Let's go to the Mayan calendar and you see Happy, the Twa, right there in the center of the calendar. They were the first stellar people who mapped out the stars, who gave us the science of astrology and the cosmological science. Huh? In fact, brothers and sisters, this may have been the first black power salute from our Twa people who said, we were the first black people here, the seed people. When it was a black planet, they were the people that our ancestors honored. In fact, brothers and sisters, it had nothing to do with no spacemen, but a little black man from the interior of Africa. They were the people who migrated out all over the planet Earth. As our ancestors said, a race without the knowledge of its history is like a tree without roots. It's our story, brothers and sisters, that's for the salvation of our African souls now. As our ancestors said, walk with the left foot forward. Why? To trample down evil so our hearts can go forward, so you can know thyself. Hotep, brothers and sisters. brothers and sisters, I'll follow up on that. I don't take money from white folks. I don't work for white folks. I refuse to take any kind of grants because that's the way that they control us. When they fund you, that means they control whatever you research on your expedition teams and so forth. They control that. So we are totally independent, and we must stay independent to keep our tongues free, to speak to our people in the intuitive way. And that means intuitive feeling of expression. And yes, balance it with the intellectual, but let's not just be intellectual. Let's take the intuitive, intellectual, and balance it so our people can feel their story in them and empower themselves. Again, speaking of my wife's presentation, you got to come out to see it. I mean, she's got a powerful presentation, the destruction of African culture seen through fashion. Okay? First question. Also, if you want to go to Kemet with us, we go every summer. Sign up in my book over here which year you'd like to go, and I'll get the brochures out to you. First question. Right in the...
Hotep. Peace, brothers and sisters. We hope you enjoyed The Theft of African History Part 2, produced by Kemet New Productions. Thank you for your purchase and support. Our other videotapes are also thoroughly documented and based on study and travel on the African continent. They include The Theft of African History and Spiritual Concepts, Part 1 by Ashra Kwesi. This tape includes both dynamic slide presentation lectures plus live lectures at our sacred ancestral sites in Egypt. It discloses the African origin of civilization based on the ancient temples, tombs, and papyrus papers created when African people were teachers of the world. This tape includes the African science of observing the universe that produced the first calendar and the science of astrology. The African Grand Master Builders of civilization who were called the first sons and daughters of light. Imhotep, the African Grand Master Builder before Haran-Abith, and much, much more. We also have Judaism, the Stolen Religion from Africa, Parts 1 and 2 by Ashra Kwesi. These inspirational and educational tapes have both slide presentation lectures coupled with live lectures shot on location in Egypt and Ethiopia. They take the viewer on a historical and chronological journey that explores African history versus biblical myths, from stories such as Adam and Eve as a corruption of the African goddess concept to the Ashkenazi European Jews and why they have caused anti-Semitism hysteria in the African community. These tapes provide a wealth of information that tells our story. Christianity, the Stolen Religion from Africa, Parts 1 and 2 by Ashra Kwesi. These enlightening, visually documented videotapes explore the African origins of Christianity. Learn about the historical Jesus and the mythical Christ, plus the meaning of the Christ concept. Those beginnings are contrasted with its ultimate corruption by a European version that causes a spiritual holocaust on African people in which the enemy became the deity. We also have The Cultural Destruction of African Fashions by Murray Rakwesi. This revealing slide presentation lecture tape traces fashion from its sacred African roots to its desecration today. See what Egyptian and Moorish symbols have been plagiarized by the fashion industry. Learn about the economic exploitation of a people using that which is sacred. See an exciting African fashion production that shows where, when, how, and why the traditional and contemporary African garment should be worn. Advertising the Attack on the African Image by Murray Rakwesi. This lively slide presentation lecture tape takes a bold new look at the advertising industry. It demonstrates how the advertising industry has used the signs, symbols, and concepts of African people from ancient times to the present to sell products. The tape also details the corruption of African images such as Aunt Jemima, Rastus from Cream of Wheat, and Sambo, plus the real story behind the corporate giants such as Nike, McDonald's, and Disney. The Great Debate by Ashra Kwesi. This lively, spirited debate held April 11, 1998 between Ashra Kwesi and Pastor Colin Akridge deals with the resurrection of Jesus Christ, myth or reality. It's an exciting exchange of ideas between an esteemed griot or African historian and an ordained clergyman from the Church of God in Christ. Egypt, from Cairo to Nubia by Ashra and Murray Rakwesi. Join the Kwazis on the Kemet Nu Know Thyself educational tour by means of this live video. Know what to expect on our tour to Egypt by means of lectures and commentaries at the sites of our African ancestors. This tape is the next best thing to being there. The exciting Kemet Nu Know Thyself educational tour is conducted every summer. The richness of our African heritage will unfold as you get an eyewitness account of the pyramids, sphinx, magnificent temples, tombs, and hieroglyphs of our African ancestors on a trip of a lifetime. We also have African Builders of Civilization by Ashra and Murray Rakwesi. It's our book, A Pictorial History of Personalities from Ancient Egypt. It provides in-depth biographical information and pictures of some of our most illustrious ancestors in black and white or color. For more information and brochures on our videotapes, books, trip, or to have us to lecture for your school or organization, please contact us at area code 214-371-0206. Or you can write us at Kemet Nu Productions, Post Office Box 41005, Dallas, Texas 75241. You can also visit our website at www.blackmind.com/KemetNu or send us email at kemetnu@aol.com. Thank you, brothers and sisters. Hotep, peace be with you.
Hotep, much time, research, and expense has been invested to provide the information in this tape for our African brothers and sisters. We depend on your financial support to continue to tell our story. In the spirit of Ma'at, truth, justice, and righteousness, please do not sell, rent, or duplicate this tape without Brother Kwesi's authorization. Thank you for your support and cooperation.